Hello, welcome to Splitting the Veil. I decided to just go for starting for once. I'm Caitie, and I have a YouTube channel called Ghildirthalen.
And I'm Jordan, and I have a YouTube channel called Exalted March.
All right, I currently recovering from a cold, so if I'm sick and gross, I'm so sorry to everybody, and they're going to have some great mouth sounds that are if you're into ASMR, this is the episode for you guys.
I love ASMR. That should be our new podcast, Dragon Age Elven Lore ASMR. It would get views, man. ASMR does crazy good on YouTube.
I don't get that. I can't stand like the smacking noises. Like I just recorded audio for a codex version of Heart and Hightown, and I just had to edit out so many of my stupid like smacking noises, and it's just so gross.
I don't do the mouth sounds, but I do like the tapping stuff. Like that is super relaxing. If it's just like ambient noise and somebody taps on like a book or like a desk, that for me some reason is relaxing. Or anything to do with water, like running water or like spray bottles. It's super weird, but I'm like, God damn it, why does this work?
Well, how do we want to start off talking about Elven lore?
Well, I guess we kind of, before we started officially, we were mentioning the fact that, you know, the concept of whether or not everything in the Dragon Age universe is somehow related back to Elven lore. Mm-hmm. Some people maybe kind of don't subscribe to that idea. They're annoyed by it. I just said, I think I'm starting to really kind of get on that track or get on that train of thinking. Mm-hmm. So maybe that might be the place to start.
Okay. I know you mentioned in our emails back and forth that you were like studying up on some Elven lore. So why don't you inform the guests? What'd you learn? So
one little thing that I kind of picked up on while I was reading that I kind of feel is related to that in some way is I didn't realize that apparently the Magisters had first learned to visit the Fade in dreams through the elves that they had taken captive. And I didn't know if this was before or after Arlathan had fallen, but I guess as the Imperium was making inroads into all of the Elven territory, Elvenon as it existed in ancient times, apparently the elves that they were taking captive, they were learning how to use lyrium to enter the Fade in dreams for the first time through elves. And I thought that was really interesting because apparently, I mean, and this is kind of more an issue of perspective or opinion, I guess you could say, but at least in some respects, you could make the argument that perhaps the Imperium was able to make further inroads, I guess, south, because the elves were sort of retreating from humans, right? So as many people know, the elves were initially like immortal and they lived forever, and as they started to come into contact with humans, elves that would spend time around human beings would start to age, and for the first time elves would actually die of natural causes, and so many of the elves kind of tried to retreat from humans. And this is more just me sort of like extrapolating and giving sort of observations or opinions on that situation. But one of the things that I thought was a reasonable conclusion is that culturally the elves desire to be isolated, or at least isolated from humans, because I don't think they had the same reaction to dwarves. I think if I understand the timeline correctly, they were in contact with dwarves, or they discovered dwarves before they discovered humans.
Yes.
So it seems specifically like they had a problem with being around humans, and that desire for isolation. Had there been more cooperation at that point, had there been more of like an alliance, at least between some humans. I mean, I don't know if this necessarily lands exactly, but it sounds like the desire for isolation kind of gave the Imperium the chance to make further progress in their invasion, so to speak. And if you connect those two things to the first Magisters being able to sort of get an idea of going into the Fade, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility to say that Elven isolationism kind of indirectly might have been a cause for what ultimately ended up being the Blights. Because without them sort of taking that knowledge from elf captives, perhaps the Magisters who originally went into the Golden City, maybe that never happens.
I think that's correct. I almost think that's bordering on I want to say victim blaming. That's not quite what I mean by that, but like, oh, you know, you did a very small thing, therefore you did the really, like, you're the reason everything's gone fucked up.
Oh no, you're right. That instinct is right, because I'm glad you brought that up, because I immediately thought, after thinking that, I'm like, well, it's not the elves' fault that they were captured and invaded. Surely not.
Yeah. Another point I wanted to bring up is that the quickening of like elves, like historically in Thedas they believed it was humans, and like that still may be true, but like one thing that Solus said at the end of Trespasser was that the veil was kind of the cause of the elves being divorced from the Fade, and therefore which caused them to age. So that's kind of, in the timeline, that's kind of, I forget the exact date of it, but people have theorized that the date that the quickening started being noticed was around the date when the veil went up. Now it does bring up though, like, what if it wasn't just that? Like, what if, like, yeah, maybe the veil, it was some reason that the elves stopped started to age, but like, if the humans also had something to do with it too.
Yeah, and so, I mean, this is where I'm not totally clear. I don't know if you are, but what do we know about, like, because we know there was a time where the veil was not up, so it was kind of like Thedas was sort of in the Fade, or it was all kind of one. Is that right, or am I misremembering that?
So it's kind of debated. Literally, the only information we have on this is said by Solus, and then the spirit Ghildirthalen. When you go into the Vir Dithara, the broken Shattered Library. So based on those two accounts, what it kind of sounds like was that Thedas and the Fade were one and the same, and that the Fade was kind of just like air around you. It was just everywhere, and it just kind of made everything just a little bit more magical, and everything was just, it was very natural. And then when Solus split apart the Fade into, the Fade and the Thedas as we know it, it kind of stripped Elven magic from like who they are, and suddenly something like it would be like suddenly the air is just suddenly gone. You can't breathe. A lot of Elven buildings that were based around magic just dissolved, which is why the Vir Dithara is what it is. So yeah, there was a question I was supposed to be answering. I don't know if I answered it.
No, I think that's good. It kind of got me thinking about the notion of elves then sort of entering the Fade in a dream state, which I guess it would clearly have to happen after the veil was brought up.
Yeah.
I wonder if that is related to the idea of humans and dwarves being around, or specifically humans, let's say. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about the Fade as being, let's just say the Fade being everywhere. It's like an ether. It's just something in the air that particularly elves are connected to. And then you've got these humans, these shems, right? These quicklings who are around now, and they're, the elves think of them as being really impatient and rude and violent and these sorts of things. It would sort of then stand to reason to say, well, these people, they're just by their presence, they're sort of corrupting Elvenon, our land, what this is to us, because the Fade is everywhere and it's precious to sort of experience that ether. We need to separate this. We can't have them contaminate this. Let's separate sort of the waking world of Thedas from the Fade, and we'll know how to visit the Fade in dreams, and these shems won't. I mean, I don't know if I'm reading too much intention into that, or if it's just something that kind of happened otherwise, but it would seem that would sort of make sense with my my theory about elves sort of wanting to be isolated.
Yeah. I think also, even without ancient elves, like that's kind of what happened with the fall of the Dales. They wanted to isolate themselves from the Chantry, when that caused that downfall, which I said that in a recent video, and everyone's like, but what about the Red Crossing? I'm like, well, yeah, there's the Red Crossing. The humans have something to do with it too. But like, for the most part, I think elves trying to just stay being elves and like really rebelling against like the Chantry and stuff has like kind of done them a disservice, which if that mindset could easily be put into like an ancient elven mindset of wanting to distance themselves away from humans and the shems and stuff like that. So I guess I'm just saying that I agree with your point.
Yeah, well, they haven't had good luck. I mean, I don't mean to sound like negative about their isolationism. In a lot of ways, it makes perfect sense. I mean, they had a near perfect society, and then the interjection of all these other races and cultures. I mean, it certainly couldn't be said that it's better for the elves after humans came along. I
wouldn't say it was near perfect, because like at least what we hear from Solus, it sounded like there was a lot of slavery going on, and like maybe the upper echelons of Elven society did really well, but it sounds like kind of the lower levels were kind of being shat upon.
You know what? You're 100% right. That was another thing I was reading that I was sort of reminded of that I did is the class system. Not only did they have slaves, I mean, they had a very rigid class system all the way down from your top people to your, like, they were very clearly partitioned out as far as what class you were in.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure the specifics of it, but like my understanding of it is that you got like the slaves, and then you have slave owners that would dedicate their slaves to one of the gods, and then you have the gods. I don't know how, like in Dwarven society, they have very clear caste system. I don't know if the elves had something like that or what, but I don't know. The gods have always confused me. I think Solus made a really good point that like the gods were really just like they were powerful like leaders, and then their just role, because they live forever, their role just sort of morphed into what basically became gods. So I'm wondering like how the Forgotten Ones fit in there, I guess.
Yeah, so you're saying it's more, perhaps more akin to like ancestor worship than actual deities.
Yeah, I don't think they're actually gods. I think was it Dorian? He mentioned that they're more like magisters, where they were just powerful leaders that because they were powerful for so long that they just started being worshipped. So, and I think Ablis had a really good quote on it too, where when you meet him at the Well of Sorrows, I think this only happens if like you attack Obelisk, and Morgan says something on the lines of, Mythal, like, does she even truly exist? And Ablis says something like, well, to you it will make no difference. Like, it doesn't really matter if she's a god or not, but she's more powerful than you, so she might as well be.
Right, that's actually exactly what I was thinking as you were saying that in regards to Corypheus, because if you look at the Magister comparison, Corypheus makes this really incredible claim, and I'm a really big fan of the first scene that he has in Inquisition, because I think cinematically it's just super powerful, and the voice is amazing, and he has this incredible feel to it, but I love the fact that he's making this claim of being a god, and you actually, from the player standpoint, you don't know if he's telling the truth, and they do a pretty good job of setting that up in the storyline of the game. You don't really know if his claim is legitimate, but for all intents and purposes, he's so much more powerful than the Inquisitor in that scene. It, like you said, it doesn't really matter. It's almost sort of like arguing semantics. He's so much more powerful, and he has a freaking dragon that is, unlike any other dragon anyone's ever seen. So, he might as well be.
Which I think that's a really important thing of like what Solus is trying to say in Inquisition, and then what you later learn from his, I guess, Fen'Harel club. I don't know what name it has, but when you go to his ruins in Trespasser, a big thing was that the slaves were brainwashed into thinking that these people were gods and could not be defeated. So a big part of his movement was saying, no, they're powerful, but they're not gods. They can be defeated. And like just changing the semantics was pretty much why we don't have the creators anymore, and they're locked away somewhere. So I think semantics can be a powerful thing when regards to this. So
super powerful, and I've always been really fascinated by Solus's sort of ethos, or the way that he sort of betrayed the gods in the sense that, like, you're right, what he was doing was changing the semantics, but he was also saying very clearly, perhaps these people should not be all powerful and revered in that way. I just think fundamentally, if you look at ancient elves and the caste system and the slaves and all of that, I mean, he reveres the ancient elven culture probably more than anyone that you see in the series, and yet he had this sort of instrumental role in sort of taking down this huge part of it.
But then also while being a part that, I guess here is where I want to segue into like talking about the creators and the Forgotten Ones, so there's like the group of creators, and then you have the group of the Forgotten Ones, and then Fen'Harel playing in the middle somewhere.
Yes.
Who were, I mean, we kind of have an idea of what the creators were, but we really don't have an idea of who the Forgotten Ones were. We have about 3 names. I don't know if you came across those.
No, I don't. I mean, I have in the past, but I never remember the ones. I think you've done a video on which ones we know about and don't. I
mentioned it in the Valasleen video. But the 3 names we have are Inaris, Gelderon, and Darenthal. In the Masked Empire, we learned that Inaris was at least a male, There's a story about Andrul and Inaris fighting over who gets to essentially kill Fen'Harel, and then Fen'Harel turning them against each other. Ghelderon, we don't really know much about, but he actually had a codex entry in Jaws of Hakon. That was the door that opens up if you gather the shards in the whatever area that is in the Hakon area. I forget the name of it. But you get a little codex entry with him saying that essentially he wants to be free, and I have it pulled up if you want me to read it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Skipping some of it, it says, there are no gods, there is only the subject and the object, the actor and the acted upon. Those with will to earn dominance over others gain title not by nature but by deed. I am Ghelderon, and I refuse those who would exert will upon me. Let Andrul's bow crack, let Juné's fire grow cold, let them build temples and lure the faithful with promises. Their pride will consume them, and I, forgotten, will claim power of my own. Apart from them, I will strike in mastery. So yeah,
that's powerful. That is like really, I mean, it's first of all, it's tremendously well written. Whichever Bioware writer is responsible for writing that, bravo, because it's very succinct and it's written in a very powerful way linguistically. So not only is this person sort of asserting their own individual power, that from a composition standpoint, as a writer, I greatly appreciate how well that's written, because it's written in this very sort of terse style that, while communicating something about, that's a very direct idea. I guess what are your general thoughts on sort of what that represents culturally? Because I have a lot of that, just inspired a lot of thought in me in hearing that read.
I don't know culturally with the elves. I guess the one thing that stood out with me was their pride will consume them. Solus means pride, so I'm wondering if he means soulless here, although it's not capitalized or anything, so I think it's just, it's a figure of speech. But I think that it says, and I, forgotten, will claim power of my own. I don't think that's coincidence that this is one of the forgotten ones. And as I read this, I was reminded of Sandal's prophecy, and which, you've heard of that?
I remember, but I can't remember the specifics of it.
I don't have it pulled up, but essentially Sandal says, like, one day the magic will come back, all of it, everyone will be once as they were, the skies will open up wide, and all the magic's going to come back. And for the longest time, everyone thought that was Solus. What if that was actually this guy? What if Solus is somehow going to unlock the Forgotten Ones? What if that's who we should be fearing? Fen'Harel and Solus seems to kind of be playing more in the middle. The Forgotten Ones, they are locked away also, and we don't really know what they did. So I'm wondering, what if they're the ones that started the Blight? We're not quite sure. So I'm wondering, like, why are they forgotten? Strike and mastery? I don't know. There's a lot of mystery here that I wish we had. Dragon Age 4, come on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think that the hearing that read, it kind of was what I was trying to say earlier about Solus, in that when I hear this particular codex entry read, and he's saying, their pride will be their downfall, and just the notion that it seems very deterministic and very individualistic, this idea that this power structure of gods sort of being, the creator specifically being in charge of things, and this forgotten one saying, I will seize power of my own. In some sense, it sounds very similar to the ethos of Solus in some way. Even though Solus would have locked away both, it sounds like that's, in some sense, what Solus was doing, trying to say, we don't need the creators and the Forgotten Ones to sort of be these all-powerful beings. We should sort of take power for ourselves. The individual should be able to sort of do what they want. I wonder how much... I guess that's the thing that everybody does. As many of us are wondering about Solus's motivations. What is he actually trying to accomplish? Because, like you said, he sort of seems to be in the middle of everything, and some of his actions could be taken to be in favor of one side or against another side. But nothing is. It seems very fluid when you look at his actions from different perspectives.
I think that I don't know if it's necessarily the best way to go about it, but I think we do know Solus's intention is just bring back his people, bring back his home. I think that is very solidly what he is all about. I think my question is like, how is what he's doing that goal?
Right. Yeah, I know he wants to bring them back, but then I guess but my question is, in what form does he want to bring them back? In what in what part of does he want to bring back the Elven culture? Where, because the creators and the Forgotten Ones are locked away. We know that that's Solus is doing. So does he want to bring back the Elven culture where they're not locked away? If so, why did he lock them away? Like what new version of the ancient elves does he want to bring back, or does he want to at some point in time reinstate them exactly as they were?
That's a good point I haven't thought of. Like, the elven gods are probably such a huge impact to elven culture that when they're gone, what would elven culture look like? So, yeah, they would probably have to redo their entire societal structure. I did not even think about that.
And he seems to be, he seems, even his regards to the Dalish are not exactly as positive as you would think. He doesn't really think that much of the Dalish, and he certainly doesn't appreciate, the way that elves have been treated in cities. One of the things that I found really interesting, being sort of reminded of the class system in ancient Elven culture and of the slavery that was going on, is that it sounds really bad, but it almost sort of seems like the unfortunate thing about that dark part of their heritage is that it seems to be repeated in the culture of city elves. City elves get put into these slums, and they're almost sort of. I mean, again, I don't want to get into the business of like blaming them. It's not their fault they're being treated so poorly, but Solus kind of has like this anger that I don't think is just purely at the perpetrators of the injustice. I think in some sense he's also angry at the elves, because I think he is correctly sensing that like this dogma of the elven gods being above everyone, and like you said, the slaves thinking that they're gods, that they can't possibly be touched, that leads to a culture where elves are then more susceptible to being exploited, right? City elves are not behaving that much differently than the slave elves of ancient elven culture, and I think that's what Solus is perhaps trying to tear down, is the idea that any elf should think of themselves or allow themselves to be subject to this great power. He's trying to say there is no great power. I'm sort of Fen-Harel. I can sort of undermine the machinations of all these great powers, and I'll show you that they're nothing.
I completely agree. One thing I've noticed this, and I'm kind of changing topics here a little bit, but the creators, how I remember them, because I'm a nerd and can rattle them off like one by one, is that they're, for the most part, they're in pairs. And I've always been wondering why. You got like Elgon and Mythal as a pair, Falandin and Durthamin as a pair, and Julian and Gillenan as a pair, Janae and Solis as a pair, and then you got Fen-Harel. And he's all alone on his own little thing. But then if you add in the Forgotten Ones, then you have enough people to kind of complete the pairs. So I'm wondering if there's a reason why they're in pairs, and if Fen-Harel once had a pair, so to speak.
And was his pair forgotten?
It would probably have to be. There's a quote by Solus. I forgot what the context was, but someone said, like, he said something like, "Betrayal is always so much worse," and I remember her face, like, kind of implying that he was once betrayed by a woman. So if that's true, we know out of the three Forgotten Ones, we know Anaris is a male, so it's probably not him. So then Gelderon and Darenthal, perhaps one of them is the one who betrayed it. Everyone always thought it was kind of Mythal, but like for the most part, what we know of the relationship between Mythal and Fen-Harel, there wasn't really a betrayal there. So what if it was actually one of the Forgotten Ones?
That would fit to me. That would fit, and I really think that perhaps his pair is a Forgotten. Perhaps Fen-Harel actually is a Forgotten One, or formerly he was, until he was betrayed, and then he sort of said, "I'm neither." I don't know why I get the sense, especially when you had read that Codex entry, which I wasn't familiar with before. To me, it sounds like if that is taken as the aims of the Forgotten, the idea that we're going to seize power of our own, in some sense, to me, that sounds like it's very similar to what Solus is talking about. But the betrayal aspect leads me to think that perhaps Solus would have been considered one of the Forgotten, and then he wasn't. He said, "I'm done with all of this. I'm going to lock both of you away."
Which would, I think, kind of make his creating the veil and like everything, and even his reputation, a lot more harder to, but like I see Solus as a really tragic character. Like I think at one point there was a friendship between him and the creators and the Forgotten Ones, and that it just kind of turned out bad. So seeing kind of what has happened is just really depressing for him, and there's like a banter between him and Cole that kind of hints at as well that he didn't want to do it, but it had to be done, and he wasn't wrong, but it's still something he regrets. So I think that'd be really interesting going forward, kind of getting more story between what happened between all of these elven gods or powerful people or whatever. Like, how did they become powerful? Why they became powerful? And what did they do to lock away? I'm pretty much convinced that something that they did was the catalyst to start the Blight, and then the Veil was trying to kind of fix that, like hide away the Blight, and then the Magisters were able to tap that back in.
No, that is very interesting. I agree with you also about Solus being a tragic figure. Mm-hmm. I think he's like the ultimate tragic figure. I think one of the reasons why Elven lore and Solus's background and his motivation is just so damn interesting is because it's got all of these levels. It's got this scale of, like, you're talking, as you just said, about the Veil and sort of these deity-like entities, and there's this high-level sort of mythology level to the whole setup. But then in Solus, and it's one of the things that I most enjoy about like actually experiencing his scenes in the game, particularly if you play a character that's romancing Solus, is he's very, I mean, it's a incorrect term to use, but he's very human. Do you know what I mean? He's very personable once your Inquisitor actually starts to get to know him. So there's this incredible scale to the story of, like, there's the high level macro Elven gods, lots of lore, and then you can zoom all the way in to the fact that Solus is very much a tragic figure because I think of the betrayal aspect of it, because he couldn't, like you said, I agree with what you said, that at one point he was probably friendly with the creators and perhaps maybe even allied with the Forgotten, because at one point maybe his views aligned with theirs, but he was betrayed. And if you sort of keep zooming in, so to speak, all the way into the romance relationship with Solus, of course, I mean, everybody should know this by now, it's massive spoilers, but, you know, it's like, by the time you're at the end of Trespasser, if you've romanced Solus, I mean, your heart's getting ripped out. It's a tragic... It's a very tragic arc to try and romance Solus, but like his experience is betrayal. His experience with sort of all of mankind, elvenkind, everything is like, I can't trust people. I'm going to get stabbed in the back. I've got to pull away. I've got to isolate myself and draw away. Like, it becomes a very personal story where this huge like fate of Thetis is all sort of, I think, kind of wrapped up in whether or not Solus can actually... it sounds super corny and sappy right before I'm going to say it, but like whether or not he can trust again, I think is like a big aspect of it. I recently released a video on Solus, and I said something kind of like that. At least I tried to. I don't know if it came across, but I hate talking about Solus sometimes, because I know I'm such a Solus fangirl. I don't want that to like come out too hard. No, it should. That's the best type of person to talk about Solus.
Hey, so I guess what I don't get, going on my own little rant here, is the people that hate Solus. Like, I get why you don't like Solus. I totally get that. But I think the people that don't at least see his point of view are, like, I guess I view those people as the people who don't listen to him. If you don't want to listen to him, that's fine. But to hear his entire plight and not go like, dude, like, what you're doing is wrong, but like, I get it. You know, like, I don't agree with what he's saying. I don't agree with his plans, but I get it. Like, in his shoes, I might have even done the same. Like, I can't blame him for that. I don't think he's a villain. I just think he's the tragic hero, where like he's honestly trying to do his best. He's not happy about it, but he's just trying to do the best for his people. And I get it.
No, I completely agree. And I think, you know, maybe on my first, probably my first playthrough, maybe even my second one, I wasn't like, I didn't dislike him at all, but I didn't understand like the fervent love for Solus. Mm-hmm. I was like, really? He's like, because I think overwhelmingly, if you really had to take a poll, he probably ends up being one of the favorite characters of the party members. I think definitely. He probably comes out on top.
I think actually, you underestimate the people who are really into Cullen, but...
Oh, Cullen. Yeah, that one's a problem.
Yeah.
He's been around a long time. He's just been with the
Yeah.
series for a long time. But yeah, I didn't fully understand the love for Solus until, like you said, I really started to listen to him and to kind of empathize with him and actually role-playing another Elven character and sort of trying to get myself into the mindset of at least agreeing with him somewhat more. He's lost a lot. He lost... essentially the culture that he loved, and he's seen it sort of continually get eroded. And everything we're talking about, there's just the ancient Elven culture going away, and sort of the loss of their connection with the Fade being all around them, and the Imperium invading, and then even the tragedy in the Dales when it looked like maybe they were going to recover. It's just like he's just seen his culture get trampled on over and over again. It doesn't justify what he's trying to do, but I mean, you have to damn well be able to empathize with him a little bit.
Yeah. So one thing I want to talk about is how much Elven lore has been just saturated into pretty much every other lore in the Dragon Age universe. You got connections to pretty much everything but the Qunari, and I think it's only a matter of time before the Qunari get rolled up in this as well. So have you looked into any of this, or?
Well, I mean, just kind of the aspect that you mentioned that's probably most interesting is why, if the exception is the Qunari, why is that? Is it really an exception, right? That's my hunch on that. Is it that the Qunari are not connected to elves, or is it that they're really connected to elves?
Yes, I actually got a PM from someone. I'm gonna look up their username because I want them give them credit where credit is due. So give me 2 seconds here.
I just guess there's that theory, right, that has been around for a little bit about are the Qunari directly linked into that? Because otherwise there seems to be there's a historical, a history gap. Why is it that you can trace back everything to the elves somehow except for the Qunari?
Okay, I pulled it up. So it's William Radko on Reddit. He sent me a PM, or she, I don't know. It's William. I'm going to assume it's a dude. William sent me a PM, kind of just asking me to talk about my thoughts on if the Qunari is a created race, because Corypheus mentions that. Iron Bull kind of mentions that there are dragon in the Qunari blood, and I think Kieran says something along that lines too, which got me thinking. Why? So the Qunari, the timeline is some Qunari landed in Thedas at one point before the first blight, and they were hit by the blight, which is why we've had ogres for so long. Then hundreds of years pass by, and then the Qunari first really land in Saharan, I think about 400 or 500 years after that. So there were Qunari at least from the entire time, but they were just somewhere else. And how did Corypheus know they existed and were a created race? I don't know.
Yeah, that really begs the question. I mean, the most obvious answer would be that, I mean, this is such a stretch. There's no basis that I have for this, except if someone, how does he know about it? Well, maybe he had something to do with it. I mean, that's the only... Maybe.
But then they would... Well, no, he would have... I guess then, so the world of Thedas has some Kossith or Qunari landed somewhere in Ferelden. I think it was Ferelden, and that's where the first ogres came from. So if Corypheus did have something with the creation, why were they plopped down in Ferelden? And the Qunari believe that they came from across the sea, and that's where they're from. So that's two conflicting things. Or perhaps they were created across the sea, but then how does Corypheus know that as well? There's kind of two conflicting ideas here. Maybe they're both true, maybe neither of them are true. And if the elves are involved... This is really random, but a long, long time ago, someone was trying to make a very accurate model of Solus for Inquisition to have Inquisitor Solus. And they were complaining that they couldn't redo Solus's ears specifically. Everything else they could do pretty well, except for Solus's ears. And they mentioned that the closest ears that they could find were on the Qunari Inquisitors. And that one always stuck with me.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of true. If you look at the Qunari ears, they're a little bit more resembling what Solus's are than the Elven Inquisitors that look like... Some of them are just giant and wacky. So, right. What if the Qunari were elves, but then they tried to mash in the dragon parts? That's what I've always wondered.
That's a crazy theory that I guess I don't know how much of that is actually supported other than Iron Bull mentioning dragon blood, but it seems like that's been around, right? Like we've kind of been dancing around it, but it's just like, are Qunari actually elves mixed with dragons?
Yeah.
I mean, I hope they are. God damn it, that would be awesome. I really hope they are.
Which it would make sense that why Solus is so angered with the Qun, because the Qun is everything he stands for. And if the Qunari are tainted elves, oh shit! Sorry, I just remembered. Okay, the Dragon Age art book. I feel like I should link pictures to this now. Concept art for Obolos actually had him with horns.
Oh.
I forgot that. Like, yeah, I've always wondered why. There's a concept art with Abolus with a beard and then horns, which, like, that's totally no-go for elves. I've always wondered why they were going to do that. So what if perhaps Mythal had something to do with the Qunari?
Oh, that's even better.
Because, like, she's Dragon Lady.
I think now I'm trying to find it, because I think I've seen that. I think I've seen that concept art. I'm trying to see if I can remind myself of what it is.
I was like, I'll take out the book, but like, you're not here. I can't like show it to you. It's like,
but anyway, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And of course that would have perhaps been just too much. It would have been too obvious.
But then why would they release the concept art of that? Like, if it was too obvious, like maybe they just think that only like hardcore fans are going to find it, or like that was like maybe it was supposed to be a helmet and I'm remembering the picture wrong. I don't know. That's a mystery.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many mysteries, and then I mean, just kind of like whatever happened with the Qunari. I mean, I think it's safe to say, however they were meant to be created, obviously something went wrong. I think that's why so many things don't add up as far as like why did they end up here, and sort of like what was the plan, and why is it not talked about? It's basically something. Whoever was initiating the whole conspiracy, something went severely wrong, and it sort of got botched, and then it seems like it got abandoned in some way, and then there's these Kossith who are now just sort of like, you know, the Qun really seems like, you know, there's a tremendous amount of emphasis on order and on a particular Qunari's role within the Qun. It sort of seems like the ideology that sort of comes up around perhaps a people who sort of lost their purpose. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's the reason why they're so emphatic about like, this is your role, because if they are this sort of abandoned experiment, then they would have had to sort of make meaning for themselves.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, maybe once they were guards for the Evanuris, and then, like, after that all came crashing down, they're like, fuck, what do we do, man? And to which the Qun was made. Huh. I could see that working.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, it's interesting that it's sort of the one part of the Qun that always seemed antithetical to me is the fact that they welcome other races, which to me is like a hint of something. Do you know what I mean? It's like it would seem that if you're as rigid as the Qunari are, you know, specifically the Kossith would say, well, this is only for us. But they don't do that. They're very welcoming to any other race, even ones that they may sort of look down on. They'll welcome you into the Qun if you follow the rules. And I mean, I'm extrapolating a lot. That's kind of a stretch, but I just kind of feel like it's the heritage of a people's, or it's an ideology that says we're not going to throw anyone away, sort of like we were thrown away.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Also gives like the Qun like a little bit. I've always thought like the Qun doesn't make any sense to my mind. Like if you're trying to sell the Qun, I'm like, why would you ever want any of that? But when you put it in that light, that kind of gives it a little bit more like more understanding, I guess. Like, oh, I can see how someone who came from that background would like this way of thinking. It's
very counterintuitive also to kind of to piggyback off of that point. One of the ways that I got into I don't know if I would go so far as to say appreciating, because my base opinion is the same as yours. The Qun is overly dogmatic, and it's I mean, it's terrible. In Dragon Age 2, you've got that one, the Cerebos, who you're trying to free him, and he would rather die because he's so indoctrinated to the fact that he has to die. I mean, it's terrible. It's a terrible ideology that kind of causes many of them to be self-destructive, but even terrible ideologies, I mean, they have some redeeming value. That's why people accept them. And one of the ways that I sort of kind of cued into this is on one of my role plays of Dragon Age 2, I was playing a very sort of kind of like a hardline hawk, just a very no nonsense sort of hawk. And one of the characters that I found most frustrating in my initial playthroughs of Dragon Age 2 was now I'm spacing the main Kunari guy. I can't remember the rank anymore. The
Airshock?
The Airshock, of course, the Airshock, and sort of like he's such a hard ass in Dragon Age 2. Like my first couple of playthroughs, like I always felt like I was losing in the conversations with him because he's kind of tough to deal with, but he sort of makes sense. Like he's so no nonsense. It's hard to sort of deal with him. And I thought I would never get the achievement where he respects you, like you earn the Airshoc's respect. And then one playthrough, I said, I don't care what he like. I'm not going to try and get his approval at all. I'm just whatever. I'm just going to play my hawk, and I don't care.
And you got his approval.
Of course, that's the one where I ended up getting his approval. And it was interesting during that playthrough. I still opposed him, but it's sort of like I oppose that idea, but I can kind of respect it when he talks about, because he's right in some sense that Kirkwall is a mess. Kirkwall's a mess. Kirkwall is a disaster, and he's saying, you criticize us because we're dogmatic, because we've got all these rules, but look at this city. It's tearing itself apart. They need the Qun. They need us to instead. Now he's self-aggrandizing. He's kind of high on himself. Like there's one response that says basically like, you can say all that, but we know you're really only here because your ship broke. Essentially, you're shipwrecked here, so you're kind of making a lot of yourself. But in some sense, he's right. The Qun does have that element of order, whereas sometimes the other cultures really lack that. And so I can sort of see the appeal from that standpoint.
Yeah. I think now I want to segue into dwarves, so we just get equal opportunity lore talk here. I with Trespasser specifically, and then also the Descent with like the reveal of like Titans and that they're a thing, and that the elves had something to do with the Titans. Like I'm personally in the camp. So there's this one fresco. Where it looks like Solus in one side holding like this circle with a star in it, and then you have a in the middle what looks like a Titan, and it looks like it's being torn apart, and there's a star in its heart. And then the next one is Solus or some Solus-like character holding again that star and looking like it's energized. Like I think the foci have something to do with Titan hearts. I don't know what, but
something to do as in they are Titan hearts.
Maybe
Titan Hearts?
There's a codex entry in I have an audio version linked to my channel, but called the Frostback Mountains, and it's a story from the Avar where Korth, the mountain god, took for some reason he was pissed off with humanity, so he took out his heart, put it in a golden cask, and then hid it in a mountain. Like, does that not sound like a foci? Like,
right?
So I don't, but the thing is in Trespasser, if you look around Ghildirthalen, there's foci everywhere. Like, there's broken ones just all over the place. So I don't think it's a rare object, but something, I think specifically maybe with Solus's, or maybe with just like, or maybe there was a bunch of Titans, and so like just seeing all those discarded foci, you're like, oh shit, the elves killed a lot of foci. But there's some connection with the elves destroying the Titans, and I've always wondered what that was. There's other like codex entries that mention that it kind of sounds like the elves thought that they were freeing the dwarves from something. And now that we know what the Shabratal is, perhaps like the stone, the dwarves' idea of the stone, of like something that like they're born of, and then when they die, all of their memories go back into the stone, and kind of have like this I don't know how much of Star Trek you know, but kind of like a Borg cube essentially. Where like it's just this collective consciousness. Like, what if that was once the dwarves, and then the elves were like, oh no, I don't want that, and so they try to cut it off. But then maybe that's what even created the blight, was that the Titans' reaction to that. I don't know. It's something's going on with the dwarves.
That's super deep.
And now that we have a Titan that's kind of awakened, and then Volta has been connected to the Titan, and now she has magic. Which what's going on there?
Right.
And there's probably other Titans with Shabratal with them around Thetis somewhere. And then also on top of that, there's been kind of a hidden quote kind of around different small areas of the game called which says the stone lives beneath Orlais, What? Like, what is that? Like, the Titan we met isn't beneath Orlais, unless it's fucking huge. Like, if its heart would be around the center of, like, in Ferelden, so what's in Orlais?
Yeah, I mean, unless it's that sort of central, that sort of central cube or consciousness that you sort of talked about. I mean, that begs the question.
Yeah. And I think another, like, Trespasser came up with a good question, but they never gave us an answer for it. Why did the elves have a lyrium processing center? Why did they need that much lyrium? I've always wondered that.
Well, I mean, that is a good. Why do they need that much? I mean, I guess they would have used it for everything, right? Would you ever have too much lyrium?
I guess that's true, but like there's just so much of it, and
right.
if that was just one center, there's probably other centers that we don't know about. What were they possibly using it for? I don't know. Like, in current Thedas, you use it to get more magic, but back then the Fade was everywhere. Magic wasn't exactly hard to come by. So
right.
What would you use lyrium for? I don't know.
That's a good point. And so is lyrium supposed to be, is it Titan, is it harvested from Titans? Is it Titan blood, or is that something that
No, that's correct. Lyrium is Titan's blood.
And red lyrium is Titan's blood in the blight?
Yeah, it's tainted lyrium. So red lyrium suggests, so the tag we go into in DA2, it's theorized that the lyrium there is Titan because the lyrium there is tainted because we are in a tainted Titan. And that thing that we fought is a lot like the final boss in the Descent. So...
Yeah, man. No, I mean the Titan thing, I think is one of those things that it would be most exciting to see in Dragon Age, for just some kind of resolution to it, and just also it would be really, really badass to see something visually that kind of gets to the heart of that.
I think just like I think we have a pretty good basis on Elven lore right now. I feel like this is a conversation for later, but this is just more naturally coming up now. We have a pretty good basis for Elven lore. I do want to see some more exploration on like the human, the Qunari, the dwarves, like kind of see their side of the story, and then as the series progresses, kind of see how they all link together. We have a good basis for elves now, maybe next game, because there are like a bunch of dwarves in Tevinter. Maybe we start focusing on them, or we focus on the Qunari, or maybe just like the humans, and like because Tevinter's kind of the heart of humanity, like that's kind of where humanity came from. So maybe next game we're going to be focusing on like what the humans believe. I don't know.
It would be super interesting because you've got the Elven lore going back really, really far, and you've got Dwarven history going back, at least much further than before humans come along. But we don't have like that far back ancient human history, or sort of like what their first steps were like. So I think, yeah, you're right. That probably would be something like figuring out ancient Tevinter history might be kind of like the way into that.
Yeah, and I think Vivian has a really good point in Trespasser and Ghildirthalen. When they find out like the Veil was created, Vivian says, well, that can't be. There's no human records of the Veil going up, or a time without the Veil. And if you look at the timeline, if we have correctly guessed that when the humans were said to cause the quickening, that's when the Veil went up. Humans were in Thedas when the Veil was supposedly went up then. So why don't they have records of it? What happened to that?
Oh, that's an even better question. You're right. That really kind of starts to... I don't know. Like I said, before I wasn't hoping that. I didn't really care one way or another, but I wasn't hoping for Dragon Age 4 to be in Tevinter, even though kind of all signs somewhat point to that. Now I am. Now I'm super interested in that.
Because those records would most likely be in Tevinter if anywhere else.
Right. So, is there anything else that we want to cover before we stop on this topic?
I guess there's been a theory going on that somehow the dragon people that Tevinter worship, the old gods, are connected to the elven gods because they have the same number if you take out Mythal, who is dead in Fen'Harel. So, is that actually true? And Solus does at one point say, like, actually Cassandra asked Solus that for some reason in the game. And Solus says there is no, I think the exact quote is, there is no written history connecting the two, which everyone's like, oh, that means it isn't. But I think because of Solus, you have to take things at face value, that when he says there's no written history about it, that means like there is no written history about it, but it might be true. So
Yeah, it's like a total sidestep to the question. Like, it's a very political answer.
So I think that maybe it would be a weird coincidence if the 7 old gods were somehow not associated with the 7 Evanuris minus Mythal and Fenrirel. So I don't know. And it seems that well now if you had that world state, now there's just your Earthremiel's soul in Kieran, and now in, I guess, what was Mythal, maybe Solus. I don't even know what's going on with that. So
yeah, as far as the original spirit that was in Kieran, now it's I mean that's that element of it. How do I put this? I sort of like it more because the old gods, you start to get into the element of like what the hell are they even? And then that's a whole other topic, but I feel like Elven culture and talking about the Elven gods gets you into like, who are the old gods? Is there a maker? That's like a whole other episode, but I just kind of like the scale of it is sort of like hard to wrap one's head around for a story. The idea of the Elven gods not really being gods, I think that's sort of it's more grounded for a story. It gets harder and harder the more you push the scale up.
Which I think is why it'd be good never to answer the question of who is the maker, because if you do say who is the maker, then you're going to be like, oh, well, who created the maker? Like, there's always going to be that one step ahead.
Right. So, and the old gods, I think, are they're not quite in the same thing, but it's like getting close. So I don't know. That my curiosity is like there, but at the same time, it's like, is it better if it's always a mystery?
I've always wondered, like, what if the old gods? Well, I guess 2,000. What if the old gods were like Corypheus's dragon, and that had, but I kind of thought that before we realized that the elves always had immortality. I just thought that like that was how the elven gods had immortality, was these dragons, but like they just had it naturally anyway. So then what was the dragons for? I don't know. One thing in the old god lore I found really interesting was that Tevinter doesn't believe that these things aren't actually dragons. They just take the form of dragons. So they might actually be able to take the forms of people. Maybe they are the Evanuris. Maybe they're even the Forgotten Ones, and there's just a lot more Forgotten Ones than we know. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that could be true, but then I think that is kind of the most interesting thing, but then it takes away that element of they're not really gods, because at that point, like, they really have to be gods, and then it's interesting. It's very interesting. But yeah, to me, there's also this element of like, to me, it would be very interesting if the old gods really were dragons. Like the idea of like, they're not dragons, they just take the form of dragons. That's cool. But to me, it would be even more kind of like trippy and subversive if it's like, no, they are dragons, and their power is just sort of like nature in a sense, right? They're just these naturally occurring super powerful creatures or beings, but they don't really exist in sort of like the humanized element of like the way elves or people do.
Well, hopefully we find out soon. In 2019 when they announced Dragon Age 4, and I'm like, oh Lord, it's gonna be so long to the next game. I'm kind of depressed about it.
Everything is kind of held up, I think, by Dragon Age 4, because we already know Anthem is like sort of like those are the resources Bioware is giving there.
Yeah,
but
and
otherwise,
and that's next
Dragon
year's
Age
game. Yeah, well, yeah, because I think so far every podcast we've talked about is there going to be Mass Effect DLC? So now we can say 4 episodes in, nope,
there isn't. Yeah, that's another episode too, like the future of Mass Effect. But, for right now, we should just be glad that we know another Dragon Age game is coming. Mass Effect will do its thing. It'll come back eventually. But we know Dragon Age is coming out, and I'm excited for that.
Amen. So one thing I wanted to touch about is, now that we've kind of discussed all of the connection to Elven lore that the other races could have, is it a good idea? Because I get so many requests. It's like, hey, can you cover like more Dwarven stuff and Canary stuff, and like I'm trying, but like a lot of I'm trying to set up a basis, and sometimes like the more complex like Dwarven things, you need to also understand the Elven lore. Like it's all connected, and I feel bad. Like I'm trying, give me a moment, but I see a lot of times that people are not happy with BioWare connecting everything about elves. I like the elves. Like, if everything ends up being, like, just how we see it now, where, like, the elves controlled everything and everything's the fault of the elves, I'm down with that. But I know not everyone is. So, do you think that Bioware should go more the route of, like, trying to appease the fans? Or, like, or maybe not appease the fans, but, like, try to go the route of, like, oh, it's more even. The elves did some things, but the dwarves were also powerful, blah, blah, blah. Or, like, elves just did all the shit.
Well, the element of Titans leads me to believe they're already doing that, right? Because of the connection between Titans and dwarves. It seems like Titans, although we don't know quite enough, we know enough to know that they were immensely instrumental, right? At the time when Titans were around, they would have been like a major force. So it seems like they've already kind of started to go that route. And the other route that I think, if we do end up in Tevinter for Dragon Age 4, I think we'll start to see sort of the Magisters and the ancient human culture sort of get that same treatment, and more so, because it won't just be in a DLC, it'll be in a main game. But I like the Elven stuff, and I like it quite a bit because, I remember Dragon Age Origins when it came out. You run into that sameness feeling. Elves and dwarves. These are cultures, so to speak. These are representations that have been done in so many pieces of fantasy fiction. How could you possibly get something that feels original and unique? And throughout the Dragon Age series, the more we learn about their elven culture and the history of elves in Dragon Age, I think they've done a damn good job of creating something that does feel unique and interesting, and sort of even subversive in some elements compared to the way we've seen dwarves in other fiction. So I like it quite a bit. I kind of feel like if you've set up that history and you've set up that lore and it's so interesting, the work has already been done, so to speak, from a writing standpoint. You can't go away from it.
Yeah. I agree for the most part. I think a lot of the people that are complaining that there's not enough dwarfy stuff, like, which they are right, but I'm wondering if, like, they don't. There is a lot of stuff kind of hidden underneath, but it's like buried in all the elven shit. So like, maybe they didn't see it or ignored it, or they just want more. That's fine. But I think we are going that direction, and I would be pleasantly surprised, I guess, because I'm an elf fan, if Dragon Age 4 is all about the elves. But I would put money on that Dragon Age 4, like, although it is about maybe like, hunting down Solus and whatever, but there's got to be a lot more like Dwarven and Canarian human-based stuff than Elven stuff. Because I feel like we know enough about the Elven stuff to get it at this point, and then the more interesting stories are going to come from the other races.
Yeah, those are where the surprises are, I agree.
Because like, at this point, I think we have enough fan theories to keep us wanting more, but where the biggest holes are in the other ones. So yeah, that I think if they were smart, and hopefully they are, like, they're going to be beating that horse rather than the Elven one. So yeah.
No, agreed. And then, actually, just one last thing to kind of back up your theory on that. There was that one writer, I keep forgetting his name, the one interview he did, and he was talking about how he was getting to write a story that was almost sort of like contained within the larger story of Dragon Age 4. I wonder if that's not an indication that we will get that sort of like focus on one particular history of one of the races.
I hope so. I've always wondered. So there's the theoretical effects, which we know nothing about other than they exist on Saharon somewhere, or Parvalan, I forget which one. And the Canary took them over. Like, I've always wondered if that is like human tribe, or is that like just a new thing that we just don't know about yet. There's also like I've been slowly going over the Dragon Age role-playing tabletop stuff, because that has a surprising amount of lore in it, and lore, there's just a lot. And some of it's really dry too. You're like, oh god, I don't know the game rules. I just want the lore. Where's this Cliff Notes version of this? But like, there's also something called fire sprites, which are essentially like pixies. Where they have like some sort of culture. Like, is that just kind of a throwaway tabletop thing? Is that going to be explored more? I don't know. Like, the tabletop information that it brings out it gives us a lot of more questions than answers, and sometimes I wonder if it's more like fan fiction-y rather than like canon. So
probably depends. Does it say where the fire sprites are at? Because we've never seen one, right?
They're pretty much everything weird that we haven't heard about yet. It's in like Parvalan Saharan area. So
right, they've got it up there.
Yeah, I think the fire sprites of it's been a while since I read that page. I don't remember, but maybe I don't even know if it said. But I'm wondering if like maybe that's what the guy's writing. I don't know. I think that if they were smart, I think the 4 races are good enough. The Thecks end up being a human tribe. The fire sprites are kind of like the. Do you remember in the one with Felicia Day, the Mark of the Assassin? They had like those little gnome creatures that would attack you every once in a while. I forget what they're called, like the gastrels. Yeah. I hate those things. But anyway, something kind of like that, where it like has some sort of consciousness and can use magic, but it's not like a new race. It's just a monster.
Right.
So, but yeah, stick with the 4, explore them a bit more. I think everyone would be a happy camper.
If we get Imperium in mainstay, Dragon Age 4, and then maybe like a major expansion DLC going to Parvalan, I'll be happy.
Ooh, that'd be good. That would be good. I'm wondering if, like, I'm totally expecting, because I've mentioned this before, I've always thought, like, each game was going to be something, and then I went into it differently. I'm expecting we go in winning for Solus, and then it's just the Canary War. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we were like, oh, we're going to stay in Tevinter, but then we're captured in Parvalan the entire time, and then the DLC's in Tevinter. Like, I don't know. They do stuff I don't get sometimes.
It would be great if I'm surprised. Like I said, right now my whole expectation is to be into Winter, so I wouldn't mind if that happened, but I would not mind at all if they pack like a really cool, like you said, left turn. Like you think you're going there, and then all of a sudden it's like nope.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, is there anything on Elven poop that we want to discuss?
On Elven what?
I said poop, but any lore.
I go, is that a section? Like, is there like a whole subculture of Elven?
Yeah,
poop?
there's a whole, it's this new Elven scat fetish that's getting into fan fiction. Everyone loves it. Now that I've said that, I don't want to think about it, but
I'm not going to Google it. I'm not going to take that chance. That's why
Jesus.
Solus.
Oh no. I don't want to know why Solus is anything.
I said that's why Solus locked everybody away. He was just like, you know what? He's like, this is not allowed. There's not going to be any Elven scat fetish. I'm locking all. This is too much. You've all gone too far. You're all getting locked away. I don't want to have to do this.
Then I would agree with him destroying the world. Like, if he says like, well, it's because you guys have got some really nasty kinks. I'm like, all right, I get it. Where's the off button? Let's go for it.
I want somebody who can do a really good Solus impersonation to like dub over the game and make that the final encounter in Trespasser, where he explains to the Inquisitor that's what it is.
Now, after saying all this, how many tweets or replies or comments are we going to get? Like, hey, you just don't understand the scat fetish. You guys are kink shaming me, and I'm kind of offended. I'm expecting that. If you guys got a scat fetish, great. I don't want to know about it. Don't comment. I'm not going to read it. I don't care. I don't want to know.
We're going to lock you guys down away with the Darkspawn.
It's a Darkspawn. Get tainted. I don't care. Anyway, I think with that, it's about time, right?
Yeah, what a great way to close the show. Super classy.
We're talking about shit. Great. This has been a great episode. Oh, guys, I'm so sorry. Anyway, did you have any last thoughts, or do you want to tell people where you can find you?
Yeah, I think we covered everything. People can find me on YouTube under the Exalted March.
And people can find me on Ghildirthalen on YouTube and Gillanon on Reddit. And I think with that, Daresh Ral.
Okay, sorry, minor disturbance. One thing I guess we should maybe keep people in mind of if there are minor disturbances out there. It's getting really windy outside. I don't know if people are going to be able to hear it on the mic, but it's howling with the wind outside.
Oh, so this is like a live cast about the hurricane in Texas right now. Okay.
Oh, I mean, I can't, and just to go off topic for like 2 minutes, I can't compare to this guy, Jeff. Like, he's been turned into a meme. His name is Jeff Petrowski or something like that. He's a storm chaser, and all night I was like glued to Periscope. This guy is insane. Like buildings were collapsing around him as he was driving into the hurricane.
Oh my God.
He's a professional storm chaser. That was the most riveting thing I've ever seen. It was so much better than everything else on the news. Was this guy like driving straight into the hurricane? I think his car got flipped over at one point. He's like God. Screaming on Periscope. It was the most riveting thing ever.
So you're like about to watch this guy die, and like you're excited.
I literally ran into the other room. My brother's my housemate, and I'm like, "You have to look at this. I'm afraid this guy's gonna die." And he's like, "Why are you watching that? Why would you want to watch a guy die in a hurricane?"
Yeah. Why would you want to watch a guy? I mean, like, I'd probably do the same. I don't know why I'm, like, judging you, but...
I didn't know how to stop. Like, that was, when I tuned in, that was, like, the first thing I saw. So I started watching him, like, during the worst of it, right as he was getting to the eye, and, like, I couldn't look away. I'm like, I can't abandon Jeff in his moment of need.
I have to relay his last message.
Yeah, I gotta stick with him and use, like, hashtags, like, Jeff be safe and stuff like that. I don't know.
Oh, my gosh.
It's not that bad for me. It's just windy, but stuff was flying around. Some neighbors' trash can just tumbled through my yard, and I was like, "What the heck is going on outside?"
Oh my God! As long as it's not like people's trampolines. Like my husband had a trampoline growing up, and apparently that thing would just take off.
Well, I hope none of my neighbors have trampolines, and if they have them tied down, if they do, but especially because across from the neighborhood there's a solar farm, and I get the feeling that those panels are going to catch wind, man.
Oh God! Hopefully, like doesn't go your direction. Anyway, we should go.
Anyway, Elven lore, right? So we were
Elven lore.
We were